The Kid Lit Club with Sally Rippin and Adrian Beck and special guest Leesa Lambert. We've just copped a pen in the face, if I'm not mistaken. That's how we welcome our guests here.
It's live. Thank you both for having me here. Really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you.
Thank you for coming on. It's fantastic. This is our first ever live episode, Sal.
It is, and I am a little bit nervous because we usually do quite a bit of editing.
Not at all. It's all. What you see is what you get with us.
Absolutely.
So we are going live, and I need to click some buttons to make sure we go into the wonderful group, which I will do.
So please send your questions in,
yes,
because we'd love to answer them. We have a specialist right here with us, and so this is
We
your
do.
opportunity to ask anything you've ever wanted to ask of probably one of Australia's most well-known and renowned independent booksellers, and also manager of the oldest children's bookstore in the Southern Hemisphere.
Wow.
Yes. That's pretty special.
Yeah.
It's quite a responsibility, let me tell you. There's a long legacy that I need to live up to and protect for the future.
Yeah.
Just how old is it, Lisa?
The Little Bookroom will be celebrating its 60th birthday next year, October 13th.
60 years. Wow.
And you look
It's
so
an
young.
epic achievement. Thank you.
It's the Botox.
Yes, we lost Albert Allen last year, but part of the reason we put on the Kids Book Fest at
Yes.
October 12th is to celebrate the birthday. So Albert opened the shop on Friday the 13th of October.
Ooh.
There was a store in the Age and it was full right from then.
Excellent. We'll definitely be talking more about the Kids Book Fest in a little while.
Absolutely.
That's
It's
But
going to be the
keep that
event of the
to
year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've got lots to ask you about that.
There's a couple of
Yay.
awesome authors on board too, which you're very lucky to have, let me tell you. And as our wonderful friend Andrew McDonald already has, you can comment along as we go with this live episode, which is
Hey,
really
Andrew.
exciting. Hello, Andrew. And any questions you might have for Lisa, bookselling in general, please throw them our way and we'll absolutely put Lisa on the spot. There's nothing we like more than putting our guests on the spot. Now, we kind of thought we would do this, we've called it Behind the Bookshop. We thought we'd do this because recently there's been a number of independent bookshops that have sadly closed down, which is such a shame. And also there's been a bit of talk on social media about the bookselling industry and independent bookshops in general, kicked off by our friends at Squishy Mini in some ways. So we thought it might be nice to chat to a real life bookseller about all these things, talk to you about how much we love independent bookstores and everything they do for the community. Also maybe touch on some of the challenges. And we thought we might get some of your thoughts too. We might get some questions coming in and really pick your brains.
Pick them.
Are you up for that?
I am. I was born ready for this.
Well, the other great thing about having you here specifically is because there are a lot of children's bookstores around the country, but Little Bookroom's probably seen a lot of changes since it opened. And so
many.
you've obviously weathered these changes in a way that some of the other bookstores maybe haven't managed to. So there's some really good things for us to learn about what it is that you do that means that you've remained so viable and so important to our industry.
So I guess that leads us right into, what is your secret, Lisa?
Incorrigible optimism, I
Right.
think.
Yeah,
Yes.
everyone who
Do
knows
have-
knows that.
A little bit of a tendency to bite off a bit more than perhaps is chewable, but we make it work.
Yeah.
We've got a great team at the Little Bookroom, and it's amazing what you can do when you pull together.
Absolutely. So can you tell us, we're gonna get down to the nitty gritty here. Can you tell us a day in the life of a bookseller?
Right, I won't tell you the time of morning that I roll out of bed. It's not as early as it should be because I'm a night owl and that's when I get my reading done. So
Well, that's fair.
just post that there.
Yes.
I grab a coffee and I sit with my phone in front of me, and it takes me, I reckon, about an hour to scroll through the emails that have come through overnight, check in on the social media feeds, and just do all of the listening. So I think of that as my download time. And then I put a list together of the things that are essential to do and the daydreamy things that I think it would be really nice to get done today.
Yes.
And sometimes I'm allowed to go straight to the shop from this point. I can do this work at the shop, and sometimes I need to sit at my kitchen table and do the work where there are no wonderful distractions like books and people. And then I use my shop floor time as a reward. Sometimes I have rep visits early in the morning, so
how does that work?
yeah, so each major publisher will have wonderful, knowledgeable, extraordinary people who come in chiefly to sell us a month of new releases, but really it's not a selling at all. It's a conversation about what's going to work for us, what books we can support with events, who lives locally. I don't have to do as much stalking as I used to in the early days. People come prepared with this information now, which is wonderful. So we have talks about events, and we talk about any problems that we might need to fix. Reps are the world's best problem solvers. The supply chain behind getting a book into a shop is very complicated, and they can work magic. Unfortunately, I've had to ask for wizards' help few too many times.
But the wizards are out there.
They're out there, they've got my back.
And so I imagine
Unsung heroes.
Yeah, and I imagine that they would come in with a whole list of books that they would love and would sound amazing, but you can't take them all. So how do you make those?
Yeah, so we've got a few big lists that would have about 400 titles. That's every month.
Wow.
So that's local and international. And the little Bookroom, because we've got such a long history, we know the people who come in to buy books from us. We feel pretty confident about what will work for our store. Imprints are really helpful here as indicators for international titles, but we just have such knowledge and experience, especially when it comes to local publishing, that's not straightforward. It'd be wonderful to get it right and not have any returns, but we get close. With Neighbourhood Books, the new shop that we've opened in Northcote, that has been much more challenging for me, trying to figure out what the community wants on the shelves. So
we're very picky in Northcote.
It's a bit more trial and error.
Can you explain for people that don't know what you mean by returns? Because people may not know how that happens. So you will keep a book on a shelf for a certain amount of time. How does that work?
That is correct. And if that book doesn't sell through in a period of time, say under 12 months, we pack the book up and send it back to our suppliers for a credit on our account, and that makes space for the next book to come around. So publishers, as I understand it, do want to see booksellers return a small amount of stock because it shows that they've supported things and that they've taken a risk. But we wouldn't want that to be too high. It's really labour intensive as well, and it's quite a sad job sometimes.
Yeah. What would you be able to put a percentage on how many books would actually get returned?
I think our percentage at the Little Bookroom would be about 8%, which is within the parameters.
Within the parameters.
And that's partly because the reps would know what your demographic is, you know the kind of things that would sell in your bookstore and what the readership wants. Is there ever been something that's been a surprise? That's something that you've taken on has been a runaway bestseller, or something you thought would do really well and it's just died?
I feel a little bit guilty naming names.
Don't name
names. No names. This is excellent.
But yes, there are always surprises. And often...
Because you can't predict it, can you?
No, and often if it's a surprise for us at the front line as a bookseller, it's pretty surprising for the publisher too. So it usually... And I'm not sure if people are aware, but picture books there's no colour printing in Australia anymore, so there's an 8-week lead time on a reprint for a picture book. With novels, with fiction, that's much easier to respond quickly to for publishers, but when we get caught out with a picture book, that's a frightening time. And that's what enables me to justify the massive hoarding of picture books that I have undertaken for yet another year. We have boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes of beautiful picture books that are in our back room at the moment that we just aren't prepared to run out of.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Now you do so much, and this is what we love about your bookshop and all the independent bookshops and all bookshops in general. Most of them do so much for the community and promoting a reading culture, which is so important. What are some of the things that you, the Little Bookroom does, or bookstores in general do, which is such a vital part of all that sort of thing?
Well, I think for us it started with story time. And I think that worked for us because I enjoy it.
Leesa
so
is
much.
a master at story time. You've got to see her in action.
I would say
it's unbelievable.
Even if you don't have a child.
It's brilliant.
Oh, I'm never
Should
going
have been on Play School.
that pressure. So I think finding events that bring the community together in a wonderful space, and a bookshop is a wonderful space, is the key, because then it's sustainable.
Yeah.
It's a way to test new books. It's wonderful to see parents and grandparents meet over something that they love, which is reading.
So you get regular people coming back.
Yes, and
Generations.
become a bit attached to the children and their parents, and watch them grow as well and grow in confidence. That's such an honour to see a very shy child come and sit up the front at story time and just really engage, and see their concentration spans expand. So that was the first thing that really started working for us, and that community supported the book launches that we started to host, and then things just kept rolling and rolling and rolling. Last
do a lot
year,
of book clubs too, don't you?
last year our book club just took off to the point that this year we run book clubs 2 nights a week, and I've got about 150 kids enrolled.
Wow.
And
That's
these
fantastic.
young readers are evangelists. So they take the conversation that we have at book club, they take it home, they take it to their extended family, they take it to
the
school.
That's the key. Get in the book club.
We only read locally published books.
Yes.
And mainly that's so that we can ask the authors to come in and speak to us, and that's a high impact experience for young people too.
Yeah.
We do a bit of outreach as well. Might go out to a school and read some picture books to the preps or talk to the kiddos. We have a community reading rewards program at the Little Bookroom, where we track everybody's purchases in the store against their school account, and we give a 15% gift voucher back to them at the end of the term, and sometimes I go out to assemblies to share. It's fun. Everyone started cheering when I mentioned the fish and chips at book club. I got some nasty looks from a principal there.
No, you've got to hook them in with the fish and chips.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you're doing a lot of, it feels more recently that you've been doing quite a lot of PD sessions, so information evenings for adults, so parents and teachers and librarians, that kind of thing. Can you give us an example of a couple of those that you've done that have been successful?
We had recently a wonderful evening where we focused on graphic novels and visual texts, and wonderful Erica Wagner from Allen and Elman came in and shared her passion for this interesting publishing moment, I suppose, that we're seeing. Yeah. And then my colleague Michael Earp went through the latest and greatest graphic novels to bring teachers and librarians and parents up to speed. And it was just such a helpful hour to really just get the most out of what an independent bookseller knows and get in touch with the magic that publishing people really are. Special.
Are you seeing teachers and parents embracing graphic novels more so than in the past? Are you seeing that change?
Yes.
Good.
It's a big relief.
Yeah.
There has been a pretty enormous shift, I'd say, in the last 12 months alone.
Right. Yeah.
Well, people are constantly crying out for graphic novels, but from the little bit I know from having chatted to publishers, they take so much time to put together. It's also very difficult for an author and an illustrator to work together on a graphic novel because there are so many more pictures than there are words, and so much of it happens in dialogue as well. Yeah. So it does feel like the ones that are being produced here are really labours of love. So Erica, I know, has got a branch that she started with Berna Callio, that and Elizabeth, I'm going to have to put her name up in a little while, but it's specifically in either bringing in graphic novels and publishing them here, like with the Salty River, but to actually produce them in Australia, I don't know many publishers who found them to be viable.
I think we've turned the corner a tiny little bit.
Yeah.
And
Nikki Greenberg's done some great work.
And I'll use the example of Renee Tremmel's Sherlock Bones series. Okay. So it's black and white printing, which takes a little bit of the cost out of it for the publisher, I understand. And it's done well.
I think,
it's done well in Australia.
Sequel
is on the way.
Pencils.
Yeah, true. There's
but Sherlock Bones is selling to America now, so that's a whole new ball game. If that is a common occurrence for Australian graphic novels.
And then there are those books that kind of cross the boundaries a bit, like the Pigeons books as well, that kind of feel like they sit with one foot in both camps.
Which are going to be published in America in hardback.
Wow.
It's really exciting.
That's exciting.
Well, I think they have live school editions that are in hardback because they like them to be indestructible. Yeah.
See, we're getting a lot of comments here, which is great. So I'm not being rude to Leesa. I'm actually just keeping an eye on the comments. Great to see Nat and Zani and Kate as well. Kate's got a question actually. Speaking of, love to see more middle grade graphic novels in Australia. Lots in the junior fiction range, which is great. This is from Kate Simpson. But what do the kids go to next?
I completely agree, and that's feedback that we constantly give back to publishers. So.
Great.
Your middle grade readers might be teenagers by the time they arrive.
Yeah, that's true. So the children's books, they're selling well, but this, well, we hear they're selling well all the time, but that might be a reflection of the big numbers of some of the key titles. Do you think that's true, or do you think they are just selling well across the board?
That's my observation on the outside. But as an independent bookseller, we've always focused on selling range rather than picking volume. That's how bookshops work. So it's not something that I can speak to from my personal experience, but it does seem that the big brands are getting stronger and stronger.
Okay, interesting.
So some of those are coming. So this is Australian authors, though, you're thinking of in general, or you think big brands that are coming in from overseas?
Both,
yeah.
Both.
Okay, so when we talk about a viable, healthy children's book industry, are we specifically talking about Australia, or are we talking internationally?
Let's bring it down to Australia.
Yeah.
Okay. And also, some of those initiatives you were talking about before, like the book clubs and the all sorts of meet and greets with authors and things like that. Obviously, the Penguin Random House grants did big things for a lot of independent bookshops recently. Were you a part of that?
Yeah,
as well?
we absolutely were.
Yeah.
Both of our shops were successful in achieving a grant. It's as well as helping with the nuts and bolts of paying for things. It's a real exercise in solidarity and support, and as a gesture I really appreciated that coming from Penguin Random House.
That was great. It's great to see the puffin rugs everywhere too.
Yes.
Well, it's a community, isn't it? We're all dependent on each other, and so sometimes I'll drive a couple of hours to go to a little independent bookstore because they're also hand selling my books to the community as well. So it really is this feeling that everyone depends on each other. That that I like my books to be as far and wide and reach all corners of the country, and so we really do rely on people who know books, who read the books, and who can then talk to customers about books so that kids know what to take on next.
Absolutely, and independent booksellers have always considered themselves as market leaders. So it might be a small debut that indie authors really get behind, and it might not be until that author or illustrator's third book that the big DDSs take notice.
We'll get to the DDSs in a moment. Now I've just got a question. Another question came through from Nat Amor here. She's talking about the legend. She knows she's a legend. She's talking about the reps, and she's wondering what factors determine how many books you might stock of each title, and for that matter, with so many books, how do you choose what to take and not what to take?
Well, now it's not scientific. Some months you just have to blow your budget and go for it because there are so many titles that you believe in there. Last month we had a situation where we had 6 new books from 6 of the biggest junior authors in Australia, and you just have to
got to take them.
Go.
Yeah.
Take them all.
Go. For publishers, I think it's incredibly complicated, and there must be so many conversations about which mid-list titles to bring in from the UK and American market. But we as a bookshop prioritise books that are published locally and books that we think help children see themselves. I would say
that's nice. That's a nice way to. That's a good way of operating.
And I guess one of the things that's been a really important part of independent bookstores reaching a really broader audience is social media too. How much has social media changed the way that you sell books and the way that you access readers?
It's huge. When Mum, Dad and I took over Ian, Leslie and I took over the little Bookroom in 2008, there was no social media.
No.
I remember one of my colleagues, Beck Kavanagh, got us a Twitter account, and I thought, oh no, I'm not interested in this. But now it's absolutely vital. We know that mainstream media does not pay any attention to children's books.
That's why we do this, right?
Yes. So this is a really powerful way for us to reach people and have conversations. And I think it's a wonderful space for me as a bookshop owner to be listening and make sure I'm not missing things or think, yes, we should put a list together of
Radical
Australian
kindness.
picture books. Yes, radical kindness.
Yeah.
This is helpful. This is answering questions that people have.
It connects the community too in a way, doesn't it? You're seeing what people are talking about, what they're interested in.
Yeah.
So it almost becomes a two-way conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's great. Okay, so we mentioned DDSs before, so I think they might come up shortly. So 60 years old, the little bookrooms had to change and adapt in those 60 years. What are the biggest challenges at the moment that booksellers, bookshops are facing? I'm sure that's probably a pretty tricky question, but are there a few that come to mind straight away?
Yeah, I think that the lack of inflation in book prices is starting to catch up with us a little bit.
Yeah.
Paul McDonald from the Children's Bookshop in Beecroft named that
Another
as,
legend.
Yeah, as probably the main factor of why they're closing their retail store in
Right.
November.
Yeah.
And it's not that independent booksellers want books to be more expensive. We just need the equation to add up.
Yep.
And unless we have a little bit of movement,
I think
it might
Paul
be hard
might
for us to
be
keep up with.
actually watching at the moment, so he might have a comment on that.
One of the things that I
hear
think
from
often
him.
people don't understand, and this would be a really great thing for you to be able to explain, is that the publishers actually decide how much a
Yes.
book costs.
Yes.
So when you go into an independent bookstore, you're actually buying it at the price that the publisher sets it. And so sometimes when you go into a department store and you see it at half the price, people think, oh, that's what the book costs, and the independent bookseller is just pocketing the difference.
Yeah.
And so
The millionaires, those independent booksellers.
but there's actually very small margins on top of each book. And the other thing is that the trickle-down effect means that the authors are getting much less from that royalty as well. So potentially we're getting books spread out further into the country because these discount department stores can buy them in bulk, and so they can spread them out so they become very affordable to a broad population. But it seems to have an impact on the independent bookseller because that's really hard competition to manage.
Well, we've actually seen prices drop from when we took over in 2008, and I think there's very little else that has dropped.
Yeah.
Well, which doesn't make sense, really.
But I think the other pressure that puts on the ecosystem is that editorial and publishing and design staff are still... Women are still not paid as much as men are in
and
that
they
industry.
work so hard, and
They
they're
do.
such intelligent, brilliant people.
Yeah.
And that-
'Cause it would still be about 90%, wouldn't it? Women in the industry compared to them.
Yeah,
Or probably
not
more.
Sure. Yeah.
Possibly.
If anybody has some statistics on this,
Send
Yeah,
them in.
it seems like that.
so
Yeah.
we can't advocate for change and progress in one area without figuring out how we're going to pay for it, and that's not. I think that's something that we all have to take on board as readers and book buyers and librarians and the whole entire sector.
I get that. We've got a children's author here who's written us a note. They say, as a consumer and not a large income earner, I'm thrilled quality picture books are now more like $17, as I always found the $24.95 cost inhibitive. So I'm not for making books more expensive generally, but I do think there's room for high-end, high-value books that appeal to a wealthier demographic. I'm sure there's a market for it. What do you think about that?
I think that's really reasonable appraisal. I think we're seeing fewer and fewer paperback picture books published. So in fact, I think that $17.99 price point is taking over from that part of the market. They're also they're also sometimes shorter books as well, so the costs are quite different. It's almost like comparing cherries with pears or something. I think that this person is absolutely right. There's room for both.
Yeah.
There's room for everything.
And so if a school was to come to the Little Book Room, because I imagine they have a set budget and they want to get as broad a range of books as possible for their limited budget, are independent bookstores able to give them discounts if they have loyalties with them? How can there be ways that potentially there can be people who, I feel like a really important message to get across is if you can afford it, go and visit your local independent bookstore, because what is a city without our bookstores? It's really the cultural heart of the city. So many of us can, but say for example if it's someone that is on a low budget or if it's a school that's got to buy a lot of stock, are there ways around that where potentially you could offer them a discount if they had a set number of books or something like that?
So it's this volume thing. If a customer approaches me to buy 50 copies of a particular book, I can approach my supplier to get a discounted rate because we're taking volume. But if they want 50 different titles, that's a lot of range, so that equation doesn't work. But we try to deliver. There are ways that we can't compete, and that's often about price and discount, but there are ways that we can. And
so many ways.
The service that schools get from the Little Book Room is pretty outstanding, and we go really, really hard on that to compensate for not being able to afford the same prices as the DDSs.
So just to back over that, in general, the DDSs, because they buy in
Did
bulk.
we say what DDS stands for?
Yeah, we probably
Discount
should say.
Department Store.
Yes. But because they buy in bulk, they are getting the books at a lower cost, basically.
Yes, sometimes 15 or 20% less than I have to pay for them. Sometimes perhaps shouldn't say, but there are stories of booksellers going into discount department stores and seeing discount department stores selling the book at a cheaper price than they could buy from the official publisher.
Which makes
that's
it
pretty
tough.
heartbreaking
And the
to
tricky
see
thing,
that.
the tricky thing, I guess, when you're thinking about this all being a community, is that's also then the authors will only get their royalties from that discounted price too. And so it's, I guess, in a way, by buying books from an independent bookstore, you're meaning that authors are getting full royalty, and you're really giving back to the community. And it is that sense we were chatting before about, if you're choosing to buy organic fruit and vegetables from a farmer's market or something, you're supporting an industry, you're supporting the environment and the planet, and yes, you're paying a few dollars more than you might if you go to your supermarket, but it's like conscious shopping for the future that you want. And so if you want a future where your children can go into a bookstore and say, Leesa, what do I read after I read this book? Or to a book event, or to have authors still be able to have places to go, because we can't go to a big discount store and spruik our books there. We rely a lot on these independent bookstores all around the country to even just be venues for us to be able to do book signings and so forth. So it really is
our
big
spaces
picture thinking, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and Liz Ledden, who's a One More Page legend, and also just had a book come out today.
I saw that.
Tulip and Brutus, which is fantastic.
Yay!
Yes, and she's got a question for us. What happens to all the bookish merch, the posters, the dump bins, the badges? When bookshops are finished with them, can fans request them or take them home?
Oh, I'd like to. That has happened on a few occasions.
I reckon when I was in Blockbuster, I used to go in there and try and get all the movie. I used to get the movie posters when I was a kid.
Put your name on the back of the
That's
poster.
right. I want that when it comes off the wall.
We're definitely open to that, but our usual approach is to bundle up posters and give them to local schools for display in their libraries.
Oh, that's nice.
For all of the children to enjoy.
Well, I know when I was at Beaufort Street Books earlier this year with the lovely Jane Seaton, they, with some of the dump bins, they obviously sometimes refurbish them, so they reuse them, or I think they did this incredible window display was that they made things out of the old dump bins and things.
How clever.
It's also just a really nice way of recycling all that cardboard as well. Because a lot of okay, here's a question for you. It feels like more and more of these new releases come with so many things. So whether it's your stuffed toy or your badges or your dump bin or something, how do you decide how many dump bins you're going to have in a shop? And you know, how does that affect the sales of the books? I mean, it does feel like when you walk into a bookstore and that's all you see, that it's quite an easy...
Does the dumping make a difference?
Yeah.
We avoid dump bins for the main part because we have beautiful shelving. It goes back to 1960, which allows us to have a lot of face-out books prominent, so we don't need them in the same way. There is the recycling issue as well, so we'd rather reuse something that we've already got. But some are so gorgeous that you just can't resist.
You can't say no.
We've had our Polly and Buster dump bin now for years. So they really do stand the test of time. I think they actually help us most if we can pop them in the window and then have stock for people to handle a little bit more easily. I think sometimes they're such a snug fit and they almost put you out just picking
true.
Okay.
And we should actually explain. Kate Simpson's asked, what is a dump bin? It's obviously a very bookish term. It's basically like a cardboard cutout standee sort of thing which holds the books. So when you walk into the bookstore, it's almost the first thing you see.
And it'll have the branding of the book and so forth. And it is a little bit, you know, I'm speaking on behalf of authors, so for an emerging author or a first-time author, it's really rare for them to get all this marketing stuff as well. And in some ways, you know, it is a little bit unfair, isn't it? Because the best-selling books are going to sell, even if you put them out the back, they're going to say, you know, where's the Treehouse book? I want the next Treehouse book. So they almost don't need a dump bin, but they are the ones that you see time and time again when you go into stores. So is it tricky to get kids to not just buy the books that everybody's buying, but to think of buying other things? And how do you make those books stand out?
Not for us, because
you're hand selling.
Because we're talking, and it's fantastic to hear a young reader get excited about a book that they are in anticipation of, and that's a conversation starter for us. If you like that, well, have you read this? And then we get going, and even if they leave with the one book that they came in for, hopefully they've got some ideas about what to do next, because it really is about momentum. I find this myself with what if I'm reading or not reading. So I would say not, but that's because
I'd say it's really important for first-time authors to get to know their local independent bookstores. That's something that's been a vital part of my career. Adrian and I both do a lot of talks in schools, so that's a really great way to connect with teachers and librarians and kids, obviously as well. But get to know your local independent bookseller, because they're going to be your greatest support, and go and sign books, propose to do events with them. So you know. That's the support network that you will rely on. And
it's really, we're so proud to see locals succeed, especially, and it's wonderful to follow people through their careers as well. We launched Renee Tremel's first book in our little shop, and now she's going to be published in America. It's we don't rob us of that feeling of pride potential.
Of course. So you mentioned the big books. We mentioned that just before. I've got a quote here from a publisher. I wanted to get your take on this. This is from a publisher, you can no longer make a book work if it's just for the indie bookshops. They just can't sell enough of a print run, sell through enough of a print run. This means that as a publisher, you have to hope that ASO and other similar educational accounts take the book on for libraries, or that Scholastic take it for their book clubs, or that you have to get it into the DDS. Or you publish it, but you have to accept a loss, or reluctantly opt not to contract it, even if you really love it.
Yeah, I think the industry's in a tough place at the moment, that's for sure.
Because that's the other thing I think people forget. I think particularly when I first started out as a writer, there was this kind of sense of us and them, you know, the authors and the publishers that were making all this money, and, you know, and we were the poor little creators. But it's not, you know, that when you get to know the people you're working with in the publishing industry, they're all passionate about what they do, working really, really hard. So it's not really, we're all looking after each other, really, aren't we? And potentially, I suppose, having books published in the DDS for me, and I know many other authors as well, has meant that I've had a really broad reach, that I've been able to get to a demographic that I potentially wasn't able to access before, which then means that I've got, you know, that now I can really support my local independent bookstore, because I have an income coming in that I didn't have before.
Interconnected.
Yeah.
Not only that, some publishers would publish books that would do really well in the independent bookshops, alongside books that they know are going to do well in the DDS as well. So it's sort of like supporting the two, I'd imagine.
And weighing it up. I hope it is still true that a book can work just for indies, or else we have a lot of work to do.
Yes. I think it can at the moment, though. Wouldn't you agree?
I have to. It must. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the range that we have, or else publishers are making a loss and compensating in other ways. This is a huge challenge for us that we all need to chip in on.
Absolutely.
And the fact is we are a small population, so anything in the arts, you know, it doesn't matter if you're a writer or a dancer or a musician, that if you publish in the US to a niche market, that's still massive. And Europe, it's the same, and Australia is always a difficult place to make a living in the arts, and it doesn't matter where you sit in that ecosystem. Everybody's working really, really hard because they're passionate. But a lot of people really are struggling and having to adapt and having to stay very flexible in the way that you have. You've been very proactive in stepping out and reaching an audience to hand sell these books into. And that's partly why we travel so much too, isn't it? You know, getting across the country and making sure people know about our books, because it's not the old days where you could just write your book and someone else was selling. You know, it's really expected of everybody to be working towards that. We're all wanting to get as many books into the hands of many kids as possible.
Yes.
It's kind of the end goal, isn't it?
Absolutely. Which is kind of, Elsa Wilde actually contacted us and she says something similar to that. I love it when my work is in those big chains because I'm so darn excited to be reaching that mass market. That is something that feels really important to me. And I have a sense that the folks buying the books are also people who are excited about books and have a bigger sense of purpose than just the profit. So I totally understand that because ultimately what we want to do is get the books into the hands of kids, of readers, potential readers all around the country. So
and it's essentially what you do on Kids WB as well, because really by actively promoting children's books on Kids WB and children's book authors, you are reaching a demographic that may not have thought of going to buy books. And so, you know, it's also, I guess, potentially reaching other mediums, and so, you know, doing radio and that kind of thing, really making sure we're just getting more and more readers on.
It would just be so wonderful to see a dedicated children's TV show about
Wouldn't it?
books.
Yeah.
The difference it would make.
Yeah, well, it would. Well, look, Sally and I have spoken about that from time to time.
Just Adrian.
So, look, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it?
So much opportunity. I know when Mem Fox is interviewed on the radio, that brings people off the streets. They Google Bookshop near me. Andrew Joyner's fantastic Dr. Seuss books got a little bit of publicity in media last week.
It did,
And people who had never been into the little book room didn't know it was there. Google Bookshop, Andy Joyner, and in they came.
Amazing.
And it makes would have a huge impact.
Absolutely.
And for any TV producers out there, well, the other thing that is a no-brainer to me is that adults are buying books for kids, but adults aren't necessarily reading books for kids. So adults need to be told what to buy for their children, unlike the ones that they're reading themselves and swapping and talking to each other about. So if anything, we need a book show for kids so that adults know what to buy them.
On that point, I sometimes, if I'm looking after neighbourhood books, I sometimes get a little lonely because people are so happy to browse themselves, read the blurbs themselves, but adults come to the little book room, they come straight to the counter and say, I have a 9-year-old.
That's right.
It's
Don't make Leesa
different.
lonely. That's the takeout.
And here's one other thing. So this is a total bugbear for me. Okay, so children's booksellers, specialists, they read the books, they connect with the authors and the industry and the publishers. They have the knowledge. Do not go into an independent bookstore. Spend half an hour of their time getting that knowledge and then saying, you know what, I can get that for $10 cheaper online. Do not do that. That is not okay.
No, I'm very happy to report that happens extremely rarely.
Good.
I hear about it happening sometimes from friends of mine that work in bookstores. It's not okay. In fact, I even went up to a woman who was photographing books when I was in a bookstore and said, don't do that. You wreck our industry. And then explained how it all worked. You know, we're all an ecosystem. She very red. Just kind of ran
That
out
must
of
have been
the
a fun
shop.
conversation.
I tried to be friendly about it. But it's true because
Only bookseller could get away with that.
Turn into fisticuffs.
But people sometimes need to be educated that if you're not doing that, you know, if you are, even if you're going online and buying them from international booksellers, nobody in this community, didn't say that properly, you know what I'm talking about. The money is not going back into our community. If people can pay a couple of extra dollars for milk to support the dairy industry, why not support the book industry in the same way?
That's a really good analogy.
Thanks, I didn't come up with it.
I would have known. Yeah, no, but that's right. I mean, there was such a huge push.
Yeah.
Was it last year or whenever it was?
Imagine if we had that kind of campaign push from the... Oh, there we go. I need to lobby the government. But I'm actually a little bit serious there because Jacinda Ardern has just come forward talking about the importance of arts as part of the New Zealand culture, and she's put a massive amount of funding into that. And some of that really is just going towards supporting artists.
Yeah.
So whether that's giving them grants or getting them paid positions where they'll do workshops in schools or extended periods of time, that is actually a way that government can help keeping this industry viable. And I did read something recently, and it looks like that the grants continue to be cut. So I think that's also, you know, I had a tiny little opportunity in Canberra when I was up for the Australian Reading Hour.
Yes.
And I had a politician come up to me and say, you know, what can we do? I'm listening to you. You know,
Really?
we're here to
Was
help.
that Tanya Plibersek?
I wish. No.
No.
Yeah, no.
Someone else.
I didn't get a one-on-one with Tanya,
Right.
but she did blow me a kiss at the end of the night.
There you go.
Yeah, right here. No, it was a member for Williamstown. And keeping in mind that the politicians that turn up to these kind of events are already invested, engaged, they understand the importance of reading. But he genuinely said to me, what do we need to know? How can we support the industry? And I said, well, as an advocate for writers, I would almost say it's potentially for adult authors, because children's authors can publish a lot of books in a short space of time, whereas I have friends who write books for adults. It can take 10 years to write a novel. So, you know, if we want that quality literature in our country and feel proud when we travel overseas and say, yeah, that's one of our authors, we've got to find ways to fund them so that they're supported and that we can continue producing beautiful work.
Absolutely.
The industry is under such a lot of pressure, so the children's book ecosystem is really... there's no fat in it at the moment. So how do we invest in new voices so that we continue to see greater diversity of creators? I think about that as an employer as well. How do I find the resources to invest in more staff and training?
Yeah, that's great. And I think Benjamin Law also talks a lot about that, that readers need to see themselves reflected in the books, and then, you know, and even say, I think he might have even said this in reference to visiting schools, you know, then children in the audience can think, oh, you know, that potentially if they come from, you know, non-Anglo backgrounds, they could think, you know, that is something that I can do, because it is very white still, this industry. It's still
And
white
it's
middle
across
class.
ability and class
Yeah,
and
that's right.
age.
So
and
diversity is
all
really
sorts.
important
Absolutely.
as well, isn't it?
You've got to see it to be it, is what they say.
That's what I was looking for.
And that brings me to a question from Nicole Hayes, actually, A Shadow's Breath, legendary YA and kids author, and she says...
And what's the footy?
Out of Sanctum.
Out of Sanctum, yes, Out of Sanctum, which she's had a very busy period of late. She asks, are consumers as interested in diverse stories as much as we hope they are?
Oh, that's a good question.
What would you say, Lisa?
I think that our community at the Little Bookroom certainly is,
Yeah.
but I think that's on a kind of a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
I think whether they're actively interested or not, I think they're benefiting anyway. So,
And that might be led by potentially teachers and librarians in
Yeah.
schools as well, because it may not be necessarily what the buying public would think first off, but potentially if teachers are saying, you know, read this book, this is about someone that's different to you, you might learn something, and kids end up really loving the book, and then that kind of then creates that spiral
A
effect.
little bit of trailblazing here,
Yeah.
some hand selling.
Yes.
We've got some comments here. Zani Louise says, and she's a bit of a Byron Bay legend,
yay, legend.
and she says, the cost of a book is just 2 Byron Bay croissants. That's a very good point.
That's a really good way
And
to
let
say
me
it.
tell you, they are really good croissants at that rate. And also, we've got one here, a comment here
But I
from...
think that's actually a really good point, because I think, I don't know what it is that, like you're saying, it's the only thing that has actually gone down in price. Everything else we expect to pay more for. Cinema tickets,
Yes, everything's gone up.
Everything's gone up. Tickets at the Royal Show. I mean, people pay hundreds to take tickets to the Royal Show.
Yeah.
But people still bulk at paying extra for books. I
Yeah.
don't know what that's about. We need to value books more and see them as something to be really treasured.
Yeah. So I've bought copies for like $5
I know.
at some point.
There you go.
It's crazy.
4 of those you got a book.
That's right. Well, 2 of those you got a book.
True.
Nellie,
full price.
Nell May says there should be a bucket of green slime at the door on the way out for those people that do the photos thing that you're talking about. Sarah.
Leave it to me. Yeah.
So we might have to install that at the little book room. So I thought we would ask you, Leesa. We talk about everything that how arts are so important and author connection, and obviously bookstores and bookshops are such a vital part of the community. Well, what can authors do to help bookshops and in turn reach readers?
Yeah, cool. I think conversations really...
Starting on social media is a good place to start?
Absolutely. I think that's a wonderful way to reach out. Message your local and say, hey, I'd love to come and meet you. Is there a time that suits? Some booksellers are just delighted for you to drop in, and some might have meetings that are drawn away. So I think that's a wonderful entry point. And tell the bookseller that you'd like to direct all your friends and family here for the book. That'll get them on side, isn't it?
Well, it's about loyalty, isn't it? Because I used to live up the road from the little book room. I think I spent
You put a lot of birthday presents.
That's right. Because I want the little book room in my street.
Yes.
I want to know that there is a store that I can go to where I can say, oh, I've got to buy a birthday present for a 9-year-old. I haven't read books for 9-year-olds for years. What can I buy? I want to know that you're going to be around forever. It's been 60 years already. I want that to continue. So I'm going to do what I can to make sure that happens.
Yeah. I think that birthday present thing is a great example. I think a lot of our story time regulars, I would never expect them to buy a book every time they came in. But I sometimes notice a little excuse to come back for a birthday present, or a bit of excitement about Christmas, because now I can buy all of the books for all of my nieces and nephews, and that's kind of a way to give back, I suppose.
Absolutely, Christmas, obviously, you're probably right in the middle of the Christmas rush right now. Are they all coming in?
This is the nerve-wracking time.
Is it?
The books come in, the books come in, the books come in. But everybody's still on holidays, it seems. So we've got a lot of books and not as many people at the moment, which, does work out beautifully because it takes a while to rearrange the shops and squeeze everything in. Yeah. It's also peak distraction time for me because...
They're all so pretty.
I haven't read this. I need to. So, it's a challenging time, but I love it. I love people. I love books, and I love Christmas. So I'm just so
Christmas
charged up for
I go
December.
mad at Christmas time. I think I'm part elf. I just love it.
I was told kids that my dad was Santa Claus's cousin last year, because
look a little bit.
He really does. He really
Could
does.
totally
And I had such a ball playing with that line. Such a ball.
That means you're related to Santa as well.
Exactly. You've got it.
Santa's
Fantastic.
neat.
Yeah. Exciting. So, if I could just take you back a sec, Leesa, to if you're a local author, you've got a independent bookshop in your area. Or, even let's just broaden it out to a bookshop in your area.
Yeah.
It could be any sort of bookshop.
Yeah.
What would you suggest the author does to make that connection to the bookshop?
I think really get along to events as well. It's a wonderful...
Support other authors, go to their book launches.
And learn from them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's just a really easy way to connect, even if it's by yourself. Most bookish events are very warm and welcoming things. So if you're nervous, rest assured there'll probably be a glass of wine there for you. And
At children's book launches? I must be missing out.
Very often.
Speaking of which, we're getting a couple of questions about what we're drinking. Yes, it's not lime vodka. It's green glasses. Okay, it's just fizzy water, or so we're told. It's certainly going down well. Let me tell you.
But I don't know if this is a good segue. There's something even bigger and more exciting than Christmas coming up. before Christmas.
And not so far away either.
Yeah.
Another way that you are obviously pushing the kids' books into the community and bringing us all together. What is it? Pushing it.
It is Kids Book Fest.
Kids Book Fest.
That's the second one.
Kids Book Fest.
Can I get my sign? Excuse me.
Please.
Yeah,
You
we're
bought
all
a
doing
sign?
about the handmade signs.
Please get a sign.
Kids Book Fest.
Wow. That's
This
more
beautiful illustration, sorry for hogging, was drawn by Sophie Beer, who is a Brisbane-based artist, but
Yes.
she is coming to Melbourne especially to be part of Kids Book Fest
Awesome.
this year.
So cool.
Thanks to your fabulous self for jumping on board our very ambitious project last year.
Yes.
We had interest from Yarra Libraries to partner on this festival. So it's Melbourne's largest family-facing writers' festival.
Family facing. What does that mean?
Well, the schools program would be really big, but this is
yeah,
for
yeah, I
families
get
to
it.
rock
Yeah,
up
yeah,
to
yes.
on the
Yeah.
weekend,
Yeah.
or not.
Yeah, fantastic.
So it's a pretty mega thing we are trying to do here for Melbourne, and it means a lot. I think that the public library service in our area and the local specialist children's bookshop are working together to make this happen. We are taking over the whole entire Fitzroy Town Hall.
Yes.
It's huge.
And what a building. It's great. It's such a great
and
venue.
It's a building built for the community, and it's really exciting to think that it's going to be full of people celebrating community
Yes.
and reading and imagination.
So tell me what we've got in store. I believe we've got 3 sessions, and during the day the ballroom bonanza is happening all the time. Right?
Yeah, that's right. So the picture book party stars Sophie Beer from Brisbane. Her book Kindness Makes Us Strong has hit a nerve this year. We are having the launch of Davina Bell's All of the Factors of Why I Love Tractors. The official launch. She's on tour, which is just the practice run.
She's on tour on Tractor. and it's October the 12th, we should say, because we're getting a lot of requests about saying, well, when is it actually on? October the 12th. Sorry, Lisa.
Thank you. Vital information. I talk about it so much.
Saturday, October 12th.
Yeah, I forget those key bits.
Yes.
We are having a chicken disco to celebrate Lucinda
Chicken
Gifford's
disco?
new
Did
book.
How about this? You've got
Sounds like I want to get a part of the chicken disco.
Fantastic, because we needed an extra. How you move, her book, Whitney and Brittany Chicken Divas, has been named as the National Simultaneous Storytime book for next year.
How
so
exciting.
we're out ahead,
Yep.
having that launch, and then we get to learn to draw Mr. Chicken with former Australian
chicken
Children's
theme.
Laureate
Well,
Lee
we're going to
Watts.
do Total Quack Up, so it's sort of like a bird
Exactly,
thing.
yeah, right. It's all coming together. So bring your feather boas.
Yes.
So amazing to have Lee Hobbs there. So I imagine kids will be drawing.
Yes.
And so there'll be sessions that are for different ages too. So,
Yeah,
So
this
that's
is,
this
10
is
till
the-
12, is that right?
That was 10 to
That's
12
the morning
in
session.
the reading room, which
Yeah.
was the first public library service in the city of Fitzroy. Then so that's for the younger kids, say 3 to 6,
Yeah.
7, 8, 9. Lee
Right.
Hobbs has a very large fan base. And then we flick into our middle afternoon session.
Words and pictures.
Words and
You
pictures.
can't miss this.
MC'd by Adrian Beck.
Yes, that means I'll be rapping all the way through it, basically.
in a chicken suit.
Well,
Duck suit.
I may be wearing a duck suit.
Things just get better and better.
I know. I have to get him to take it off all the time. Every time we come on camera, take the duck suit off.
Which can get awkward. So the words and picture session. This is what I love about it, because we're going to talk radical kindness
With Sally Rippin.
and Ingrid Laguna.
Yes, it's going to be wonderful.
Yeah.
She's published a beautiful book story,
Songbird.
Songbird,
Yeah.
about a refugee and her ability to find herself through music. Really. So
It's
that's lovely.
it's beautiful,
Yeah.
and it hit the mark with our Year 3 and 4 book
Yeah.
club,
Oh, great.
and all of their parents
Yeah,
as well.
it's really lovely.
Sally's written a few books too, but none come to mind. And also, this is what's going to be fun. We're going to do an illustrated battle. So Adele K. Thomas, James Hart, Heath McKenzie, Lucinda Gifford again, Jeremy Lay, Ben Wood, and
That's all.
That's all.
That's 6 illustrators.
And see, what happens in this illustrator battle is that if you get knocked out, you've got to do a death scene. And then those that are dead go to the graveyard, and one of them can get voted back in for the grand final. I mean, like, clearly I'm overexcited about this. No, this is what's happening.
Oh,
This is going to be great.
This is the centerpiece.
And Mr. Walker, the dog.
The actual dog
Yeah.
that the Mr. Walker stories are based on.
It's like when Bob Morrison sort of toured the country back in the day.
He's bringing his carer and a paw stamp, so he'll be signing. Plus, Andrew McDonald and Ben Wood are going to talk
the
pigeons, and Adam Wallace and James Hart are going to talk cowboys and bird brains.
Yes, it's going to be awesome. And then the final session, 3 to 5, listen up, speak up.
Yes, this is
This
tapping
one
into...
has some of my favourite ones.
Oh,
This is a really good one. I'm going to hang around for this one.
So in our U5-6 book club, we talk a lot about families being in fiction or parents being killed off so kids can have adventures. And we've realised that this year we've got a few excellent releases that leave the parents in. So Emily Gale is going to chair a panel with Nova Wheatman, Philip Gwynn and Davina Bell about families in fiction.
That's kind of cool.
Fiona Hardy's coming in to talk about filmmaking,
Nice.
how to make a movie in
12
days. And Solly Raphael,
Yes.
young activist and slam poet champion, will be performing for us.
Amazing.
It's going to be great.
Oh, it is
Probably not in a duck suit.
tremendous.
He's probably not.
He's quite stylish,
Yes.
Adrian.
What are you saying about me, Lisa? I don't know quite what you're getting at there. It's going to be a great day.
Yeah,
And
well,
what can we expect from Nevo? Have you
unfortunately had to pull out.
Okay, alright. I was just reading
was
the
a
post.
chance.
What a shame. I was really looking forward to meeting him.
Another time.
Yeah.
Another time.
Yeah.
they'll
Well, that's
come.
great. And that is obviously run by your good self and Yarra Libraries.
That's
and
right.
such an incredible initiative that you just thought, I want to do this, I want to share this with the community,
I
and
just
you pulled it all
we
together.
believed that there was an appetite for this kind of event, and we've made it happen.
And last year's went off. It was massive.
It was just
It was
beautiful.
really, really fantastic.
Sometimes when I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed, I look back to some of the beautiful
Yeah.
photographs from that time, and I realised how much I got to enjoy
It was very
the
special.
day.
And another great example of community, isn't it? That it's not just the community that come, but the fact that Yarra Libraries were so on board. Because, you know, the other thing we need to
Incredible.
speak about is the importance of libraries and teacher librarians
course,
as well in getting books into the hands of kids. And also just educating them to a broader range of what they might access themselves. So, you know, teacher librarians too.
So the guys at Yarra Libraries have really taken on the ballroom bonanza.
Yes, so
which
what have they got planned for that?
This is the free all day activity hub. This is what I describe as Comic Con for kids books.
Comic Con for kids books.
Yeah.
So you'll come in, the Yarra Libraries Pavilion will welcome you. You'll be handed some kind of treasure map guiding you around the ballroom. You'll be given a bag, possibly with Sophie Beer's beautiful illustration printed on it, a real memento of the day that you can use for your library books. And there will be publisher stands, and on those publisher stands there will be writing activities, craft activities, and even more authors and illustrators that I will be announcing, or we will be announcing over the next 10 days.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Amazing.
Wow.
It's crazy amazing. There'll be sensory play tables. There'll be the Melbourne Young Writers Studio, the Kids' Own Publishing Cubby, so kids can come in and make their own stories and take them home. There'll be coffee carts and food stuff out the front in the forecourt. So really, just make a day of it, is what I'm trying to say.
This is why
Skip the show.
This is why we love you
Yeah.
and we love our bookshops and booksellers, because this is such an amazing event, and you put it on purely because you're passionate about the industry of kids books. It's
very
incredible.
special. So how do people find out more if they want to know where to book tickets?
They can head to the Little Bookroom Facebook page.
So you have to book because last year it sold
Sold
out.
out, yeah.
Yes, and the littlebookroom.com.au has a nice square there for you to click onto the link and
Look for the square.
Cross it.
That's right. So we do have to wrap this up, Lisa, but we've got a couple of questions that I thought I might get to quick fire before we do. One is from Tim Harris. Who,
Hi Tim, we'll be seeing you soon.
Yes, who wrote Mr. Van Buckle and Toffle Towels,
Yeah.
which I've just finished with my daughter, which we loved.
Excellent.
And his question is, just how important is a good book cover?
Interesting.
these days. Are we sort of, we
Judging
don't...
a book by the cover?
We're not doing that anymore? We're sort of more sophisticated than that these days? Or?
I think, Tim, covers now are more important than they ever have been.
Really?
We have
Is that the Instagram generation coming through?
I think so. And think about the rise in graphic novels. There's just visual literacy in young people today is way beyond what.
And I reckon more competition too. Even, I had my first book published 25 years ago or so, but it does feel like there's more and more books out there and more choice. So in some ways a good cover, it has to stand out, but it also has to tell you what the book's about too. So if you get it wrong, people are thinking it's not the book they picked up.
And I think, Tim, further to your question about the cover, it's also the quality of the production of the cover and the design. So
really important.
Those things make a huge difference, especially when people are selecting books as gifts. They want them to be really precious objects to savour as well.
Kind of like vinyls now, isn't it? Like when you buy a vinyl, you want it to be a really precious thing, don't you? Even CDs now. These days, if people are actually going to buy the object, they want it to be a bit special.
Absolutely. Yeah. Another question. This is from Adam Cece, our friend over there in South Australia.
This is so much fun. Who else you got?
I always wondered what the market is like for kid-lit audiobooks, and if there is a market, are they sold mostly online or are they sold in bookstores?
I think some retailers do very well with audio.
Yeah.
But I suspect that most are listened to through library websites. Borrowbox, and Storybox library for picture books. It's something that we occasionally have requests for, but because our resources are limited, we probably don't put as much time into that as we could.
And most people are downloading audio files these days, aren't they? Very few people. I don't even have something that would play a CD anymore. So.
I think there's a small market for the car.
Yeah.
But that's
Okay. Terrific. Okay. Well, and our last commenter here, unless we get a late breaking comment, is from Talia Dawes.
Oh, hi Talia.
And she's got something very exciting to say. I'll be doing a ticket giveaway for Kids Book Fest on Instagram this week.
Yeah.
Wow. So I guess that might be through her Instagram or Yarra Library's Instagram?
Yes. The Instagram.
Oh, we get breaking news here.
It is really exciting. Talia runs an amazing sensory play account on her Instagram.
Yep.
And I have just... the account is Adventures in Learning and Play. Adventures in Learning and Play.
So if you are interested in winning your way to Kids Book Fest, keep an eye on that account this week. Leesa, you have been an absolute star.
Leesa the legend.
Leesa the legend Lambert.
You guys are huge champions of bookstores, and we are so grateful all the time. Really appreciate you batting out there for us.
Well, that's the other thing, is that you're, as an independent bookseller, you're also part of a big community of other independent booksellers. In fact, a lot of you do meet up quite regularly. You do exchange ideas, and in fact, even some newer stores that I've spoken to have said how helpful you've been in giving them advice and how to set up. So really, even independent bookstores as a community within itself. In the end, you're all servicing your own demographic. So why not support each other?
That's how we certainly feel. We're not in competition with each other. We're in competition with Netflix.
Absolutely.
Great.
Well, that's a great takeaway. We're all in this together, except for those that work for Netflix. Thank you so much, Leesa, for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
We will continue the conversation on our various Facebook platforms, and this will also turn into a podcast, which we'll put up hopefully tomorrow. Or you're listening to it right now, potentially. Well, that'll do you head in. But thank you so much for joining us, Leesa. And that's been Behind the Bookshop, our first ever live special. And we better put the end credits up. Oh, you've been watching the Kidlit Club. Good on you. See you next time.